most psychologically aware generation in human history. We know our attachment styles, we know our trauma responses, our dopamine loops, our cortisol spikes. And yet we are the most unsuccessful generation at basic human living. Like relationships, commitment, identity, community, that kind of thing. So something is catastrophically wrong with what we think knowledge is supposed to do for us. We have inadvertently stopped being human beings and turned ourselves into machines, looking for our lost manual. But maybe there is something deeper. This is the death of wisdom. I recently explained the sense of meaninglessness, essentially the nihilism that is plaguing the Western world. So for the past 70 years or so, we have been living in the philosophy of postmodernism. So let me just quickly plug in here. I am not a philosophy channel that just dumps information and terms and like big jargon on people. I'm going to explain what is going on and the out or the exit from the problem, okay? Okay. So, postmodern philosopher Jean-Francois Lyotard, he summed up the movement of postmodernism as an incredulity towards meta-narratives. Essentially, the skepticism and the deep distrust that we have accepted of any kind of grand narrative or institution, okay? So we don't trust government, we don't trust the church, we don't trust hospitals, the school system, corporations. We don't trust anything that involves a corporate body of people, especially if we think that they are elite. Well, if narratives and meaning don't come down from a designated group of people or thinkers, then inevitably it has to come from the individual. So it was during the time of like the 18th and 19th century Romanticism that life was about expressing oneself, and identity comes from within. Sounds familiar? You be your amazing self. It does sound very romantic. It wasn't called expressive individualism then. America, though, is the land of the individualist. And so we went from rugged individualism to expressive individualism, from absolute truth to subjective truth, from traditionalism to modernism, from order to chaos. Now, I'm not stating that the past was just better. You definitely didn't hear me say that. I'm just clarifying where we came from. So it's very interesting that we actually want to go back to the nostalgic 1950s. Apparently that's just going to make all of our pain magically go away. So that is not a wise response. That is a fear-based response. So this is also where we are seeing a rise in the return of Christianity or Judeo-Christian values, which is a framework outside of oneself, the individual. So whether that return is based out of fear, an actual commitment to objective reality and or real belief is to be determined. But that brings me to wisdom. What is wisdom? I could give you a dictionary definition, but I'd rather just make one up myself. So I define wisdom as the art of living well. So that probably sounds highly subjective, except that wisdom by default is tied to objective truth and reality. So it is the application or execution of objective truth according to a situation. So when America rejected the Judeo-Christian framework for postmodernism, in theory, it sounded great for the person, for the individual, except that human beings, well, we all live with other human beings. We have a tendency to forget that. You cannot have social order or real relationships if everybody is their own moral authority. It's actually structurally impossible when people come together in the same exact country with subjective personal meanings that is to them truth. So that's how you can get a person with a PhD after 14 years of schooling not being able to answer if a man can or can't get pregnant. Okay? That's because you have two opposing narratives and worldviews coming together. So when a framework is kicked out, we all know that nature abhors a vacuum. Individual meta-narratives come in, but they weren't enough on their own. Why? Because they couldn't fill the vacuum of the collective. So in comes science, therapy, neuroscience, and none of them are the same as wisdom, and none of them were designed to do what wisdom does. Okay, so the word wisdom didn't actually go anywhere. Jordan Peterson has touched on it. Chris Williamson, he has branded around it with modern wisdom, though there is no wisdom there. Ryan Holiday, he curates stoical wisdom. But knowing about wisdom and having wisdom are two different things. Okay, so before science, a regular human being could become a sage without a degree. Right? So this is why people thought that their grandparents were really wise. In a lot of classic literature and myths that I have read when I was a child, and I'm sure you know the narrative, it's the young boy who goes off on a journey to meet an elder, genteel man, or the ethereal woman. Oh, sage, what must I do to achieve whatever it is that they seek, right? So this is in countless books. The Alchemist is one. The Richest Man in Babylon is a wisdom financial book, right? So these books worked because they taught principles through the narrative and not step-by-step technical blueprints. So you wouldn't even need to have a finance degree to read The Richest Man in Babylon. So what has happened is we have outsourced our minds to the technicians because we've been convinced that reality is too complex for the average human being now to understand. So we traded the sage for the technician, and now everybody needs a degree. But a technician can fix a part, but the technician can't tell you where to drive the car. So neuroscience and psychology, they are legitimate fields doing legitimate things, but they are diagnostic tools, not moral frameworks. And they have only really been dominant for the past 30 to 40 years. So for a generation or two, all of Gen Z. So Freya India, she has observed that therapy culture had become a religion for young girls. We have some people saying that feminism is a religion for the far liberal left. We have the religion of biohacking and optimization. These are all tools and ideologies with none addressing moral and character problems that ancient wisdom traditions and deep thinkers have built upon for thousands of years. But wisdom was not just for the deep thinkers. Because Gen Z has lived through this lens of science, they have dismissed their parents, grandparents. They don't even know what a mentor is, but I wasn't told what a mentor was when I was younger. But all elder wisdom is now dismissed with okay, boomer. So Gen Z is talking to some people who lived through actual bona fide wars, and their greatest problem is that their DoorDash app glitched. We can't keep blaming COVID. There was much worse things in life than COVID. So wisdom, it transcends time and technology. So what you do is you identify the timeless principle, you extract it, and then you apply it to your situation. In order to do this, though, you must accept that there is an objective truth that many people today are reluctant to accept. Human nature hasn't changed. That's why social scientists, marketers, politicians, and the like can predict exactly how we'll behave. Not necessarily individually, but definitely collectively. Speaking of the collective, wisdom is rare and it takes time. But what about common sense? I'm glad you asked. Common sense was sensus communis in Latin. There was a shared objective reality. There was a general truth that applied to the whole community, usually based off of survival. People, when they think of common sense today, they usually just think of themselves and some sort of baseline of understanding, but you can't have it as an individual. We no longer have a baseline or a standard of truth, and we're drowning in superfluous information or data. I have said that in a world full of too much information, common sense is blurred and the bliss of ignorance is lost. So is there any hope? Well, yes, but it's not fast and you can't get it at a drive-through. I said that I defined wisdom as the art of living well. So it's not technical. This is not information. It's not necessarily insight. It's definitely not just a reading list. Art implies skill developed over time through practice. Living implies that it has to be tested against actual existence, not theorized, not studied, actually lived. And lived experience also isn't wisdom. That's just personal history. I said art and living. A person can live 80 years and make the same exact foolish mistakes. That's not wisdom. So when wisdom was passed down, it was written in either poetry or stories or even the epic poems of like the Odyssey and the Iliad, the parables of the Bible. Ancient stories didn't give tips, hacks, 5 red flags. They gave archetypes of people, human behaviors in action. Right? There's the heroes of the story. They interact with loads of different people all throughout their journey to show you how to live and the consequences of people's actions. Why? Well, our brains remember things better in stories. So I'll just close with this, okay? The wisdom stories are rarely Castaway with Tom Hanks, just one lonely character. There's loads of people in wisdom literature. We're suffering right now from the fallout of hyper-individualism, but we're still too proud to acknowledge that we're failing, collectively. The systems failed, the institution, the schools, men, women, boomers, etc., but never the individual. So you know what else silenced wisdom? The lack of humility. It takes humility to say, I don't know. It takes humility to say, I need help. Because we lack both humility and trust, we reject the natural dispersion of talents meant to protect humanity. Civilizations involve people, multiple people, who are not the same. We're not supposed to be NPCs. And so the collective shatters into a predatory, individualistic culture where the smart and the rich, right, the elites, dominate the less intelligent and the poor. So we killed objective reality, replaced the sage with the diploma, broke the generational link, and then we let our arrogance destroy our common sense. So when a society completely loses its objective footing, its wisdom, and its humility, it becomes entirely paralyzed. People lose the ability to make sound choices or decisions and thus accept accountability for their actions. So how do you know when you're making the right decision? This video was on theoretical wisdom, but there is an everyday practical wisdom. And that's next, the death of prudence.
Join me on the floor and let's see what you can do. Is it just for show? Say, girl, can that body move?